national security correspondent at WTOP Radio here in Washington, D.C., and also the host of Target USA. Target USA is a podcast that we've been working on for about a year that takes a look at all of the threats, the actors behind the threats, the people that are working to prevent the threats against the U.S., and what we do is we try to go out and find as much information as we can about what the situation is regarding any specific threat. If there is something big that comes up during the course of the week, we will focus on that, but we also have a working operational plan to cover certain elements and events. Specifically, we work on the North Korea threat, we work on ISIS, we work on terrorism, we work on a lot of different elements that have to do with national security, specifically imminent threats. Some threats may be down the road. We also talk to people about their views on national security, how to fight terrorism, how to deal with a certain element of something that may be a problem with U.S. national security. Coming up this week on Target USA, we're focusing on something that happened a couple of weeks ago in North Africa. We were there for a security conference, and during the course of this security conference, out of the blue, a spat, if you will, broke out between a Russian scholar and an American scholar. The Russian scholar took the podium and began almost instantly to, for lack of a better word, trash U.S. military policy. He said essentially the U.S. Military intervention in the war on terror had caused it to fail. He said it was a fiasco. He was very specific about his criticism of the U.S. Africa Command, saying that it overstepped its bounds and saying that it did not listen or take into account what it was that authorities in Africa want, and it launched independent raids and attacks without notifying governments. Most of what he was saying was completely untrue. Some of it may have had some resonance in some sectors, depending on how you look at it, talking about the war on terror, whether or not it's a success or not. But it was very blatant. It was very obvious that at this very large gathering, he wanted to stick a finger in the eye of the U.S. And he happened to work for the Russian Academy of Sciences, which is a Russian government organization, and his comments were blistering. So this week on the program, we feature those comments, but we also feature on the program this week the response, a surprising response that came during the course of that situation, a response from an individual who works here in Washington at a think tank, who took to the podium and actually altered his remarks to address the situation. He was so outraged, like many of the other Americans in the room, that here was this Russian scholar in public trashing U.S. military policy, who, and this fellow, by the way, did not mention anything that Russia was doing in Syria, anything that Russia had done in Ukraine or Georgia or Estonia, but he was very critical of what the U.S. had done in Africa. So this American scholar got up and essentially let him have it. And he pointed out some very obvious facts that most folks who follow the situation knew, and that was that the Russians and the American government officials had already decided and stated that they would like to work together, and perhaps they would like to do some things together that would fix some of the problems that the war on terror had encountered. But the scholar who stood up to mention that the Russian scholar did not take that into account. So the American scholar corrected him. He did it in just as brash a way as the Russian did. And it was a very interesting view that suggested to everybody in the audience that this anti-U.S. sentiment that seems to be permeating from Moscow has trickled down into the ranks of the intelligentsia there. And maybe they're a part of their process to engage the U.S. in whatever way is necessary. But what was really surprising about this was the backlash that took place. All of it took place in public. So we'll have a very good look at what happened. We'll have the exact words from the people who were engaged in it on this week's edition of Target USA. And we hope that you can join us. Thank you.